Hi there, and welcome to the study of endangered languages, a deep dive into preserving Scottish Gaelic. Starting off with history, we have where it started off. So Gaelic is an offshoot of the Irish language, which was introduced in and then later became a dialect in the 13th century. It was different enough to create its own language, while also being part of the Celtic languages, more specifically from the Gaelic group. And it came from a group called the Gaels, who came from an northeastern province in Ireland. So for the spoken language in the past, how many people spoke it? It was about 30% of Scotland that spoke it in 1690s. And the countries that spoke it included Scotland and little bits of Ireland. So for the present, people that speak it now is about 60,000 people. And the places that speak it now include Scotland, as well as some islands off of the northwest coast of Scotland. There's also communities that speak it in the US, Australia, and Canada, which include Nova Scotia. While for the field work, there's a current drive for the language to be saved, specifically in using things such as road signs and other aspects of the government. There's also a push to use Gaelic in schools, including insignias and teachers using it in their curriculum. And the only country that is currently pushing this effort is Scotland. And now to move on to geography with Brad.
Thanks, Carly. This is the geography section where I'll go over where Gaelic is currently spoken, where our field work will focus on, and who to talk to. As you can see here, there's a brief map about the regression of the language going into these islands off the main coast called the Hebrides. So to start, we are going to go to the capital of Scotland, which is Edinburgh. And then going to the main university, which has a great academic allure for everyone in the city, and it's also a great place to start because of the culture that surrounds the city. And then we'll meet up with the head of the linguistics department to understand where the language stands today. And this goes into who we talk to. Alice Turk is the head of the linguistics in the English department at UE. She has a great variety of field work that focuses on Gaelic and preservation of the language, and then her extensive knowledge and networking being the dean of the university is going to be very beneficial for the fieldwork. And then there's Katerina Rennie, who was listed as a research assistant, and her knowledge in the field will help us understand what type of questions we should and shouldn't ask, who we should talk to, and then other practices we should employ in our research. And now we will move on to archiving.
Thank you, Brad. So, like any dying language, it's imperative that the linguistic community surrounding Gaelic takes the time to come together and help preserve and archive the language. Anthropologically, there are many different ways that a language can be studied and preserved, and in the age of technology, it's easier than ever to record endangered language data. Why is it important, though? Well, when a language dies, a culture dies with it. A language is the single most important tie to the way that people exist because the way one speaks says so much about the way one lives. Archiving languages helps us preserve ancient cultures and their rich history so that we may know ourselves and our own cultures better and keep in touch with the people who lived long ago. So, what's being done about it? There are two important organizations that I'd like to touch on. One is the Endangered Languages Archive, run through the SOAS University of London. This is a massive database dedicated to dying languages with the mission of helping their preservation through archival, language training, and transcribing. The other is the Endangered Languages Documentation Program, which helps linguists, anthropologists, and researchers document endangered languages worldwide through fieldwork. This is the most effective way to protect and preserve languages on the verge of extinction. Because of all this, the future looks really bright. Like I said earlier, we live in a digital world where libraries and databases can carry massive amounts of information about dying languages, access to on an academic level. There are also several language learning tools accessible at your fingertips through programs like Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, and Babbel. Scottish Gaelic is available on Duolingo for English speakers to learn, along with other endangered languages like Irish Gaelic and Latin. It's a tool that will move this language forward and maybe keep it from going extinct forever. Now, I'd like to pass it to Emma, who will discuss the importance of ethics in research.
Thanks, Sean. So today I'm going to be just giving you guys a brief overview of some of the general ethical guidelines linguists follow when they are conducting fieldwork, and then how we would improve upon that. There are two crucial components to any kind of ethics when we're talking about linguistic fieldwork. The first is respect, and the second is responsibility. With respect, linguists often recommend that you have a knowledge of culture before you go and study that culture's native language, that you ask the participants who you're interviewing for informed consent, that you create collaborative relationships with the people you're working with rather than just using them for your own gain for learning about this language, and that you're also working for a community and being in that community and being a part of it while you're recording your fieldwork. In terms of responsibility, for the people that we're affecting as we go and collect this data, we have a responsibility beyond just the research we are trying to record. We have to avoid the harm and wrongdoing of participants in our study. We have to have a long-term conservation goals, as Sean was just talking about archiving. We need to have a plan for that before we step into this. And we also have to find a way to give back to the community as part of our responsibility for having taken something from them and learned something about their language. In terms of our own linguistic field plan, we also had followed these two components. In terms of respect, we plan that if we were to ever go and try to conduct fieldwork for Scottish Gaelic, that we would consult the community leaders like Brad was talking about at the university. We can consult people who would know who are the best people to talk to about Scottish Gaelic. We would perform constant consent checks to make sure people know what is happening and where their information is going. We would let the speakers set the rules for our interviews rather than us doing it. And we would also try to attend local events so we can be a better part of that culture and understand the language better. In terms of responsibility, we would try to leave the community with some kind of educative material, something that they can give to their children to help them learn this dying language in an easier way. And by creating this simple guide, that is help in of itself, but we would also ask the community beforehand if there's any kind of specific help in terms of language or education that they could use that we could offer them for thanks for letting us study their language. I'm going to let Caitlin take the wheel now, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about some resources we could find.
Yeah, so as we mentioned previously, Duolingo is helping with preservation efforts of Scottish Gaelic. Only about 1% of Scotland's population can actually speak Gaelic currently. Not only does Duolingo teach the language, but it also creates a global interest in it. This inspires people native to Scotland to learn a language of their country and also have pride in it. Duolingo is also more convenient than taking classes or completing workbooks. Another thing we focused on was immersion education. So it's basically a bilingual education program that requires at least half of classes to be taught in the respective language. This program helps to revitalize the language, but it also introduces new varieties that are seen as inauthentic by older speakers. Dunmore defines this as snobbery, which deters people from attempting to learn the language, which is problematic. So our fieldwork would be essential in documenting and revitalizing this endangered language. As previous studies note, Scottish Gaelic is spoken most in urban centers, so that is where we would begin. Existing fieldwork archives the language or looks at immersion education programs, but we would also leave resources for the community as outlined in our ethics plan. We would archive the language as well as advocate for its revitalization by actively engaging the community. We'd also explore other methods of revitalization to address the problems with immersion education programs. And if you're interested in this topic, you can check out these studies that we used in our presentation, an article about current efforts for revitalization of Scottish Gaelic, and also an article about Duolingo's role in the preservation of the language.